Good morning.
Good morning, you two. Man, I'll tell you what, you guys on this podcast are doing everything that every program director and consultant said, don't do it. Just tell them we play 4 songs in a row without talk.
We're rebels at heart. Yeah.
What you dig into, it's like you're on the edge of our own personal thoughts, and you pull us in because it's like, I mean, who would have ever thought that Robert Plant would pay a radio station not to play Stairway to Heaven?
And possibly do it in the name of his record company, Head.
Wow. How do you locate information like this? Is it readily available? I mean, or do you just start digging and asking questions?
I think it's a combination of both. I think some of it's pulled from the recesses of our misspent youth, reading Hammer of the Gods over and over again. And then once we pick a topic, we dive in obsessively. I mean, that's at least my route. What about you, Heigl?
Well, Jordan actually does a lot. We both do a lot of fact checking, and I tend to free associate a lot, and Jordan put the onus of fact checking those free associations on Jordan, which he does wonderfully.
Wouldn't you say that we're all content nerds? That we can't get enough of the content, and we can't figure out newer ways to get it out there? There's just, I mean, it's like, oh, really? I can go that way? Oh, I'm going with it then.
Well, there's a big signal to noise ratio that's pretty lopsided. I mean, I hope that our stuff is interesting and holds up to scrutiny enough that it kind of doesn't get lost in the chatter. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there.
Yeah, the title of the show, Too Much Information, is both, sort of a cry for help in addition to sort of a description of what we do too. It's sort of a disclaimer at the beginning of like, yeah, we're going to get into the minutia with this, and we're proud of it. So we find that it helps filter out the people that maybe aren't as into that.
Well, you make me feel very human in the way of going, okay, I've made a lot of mistakes in life, and I'm not Mel Bean. I'm not going to steal from Nelson Mandela, but I have stolen toilet paper before, though.
She gave Mel B took that roll of toilet paper from Nelson Mandela and gave squares away to her friends as gifts, which I kind of love that in a funny way. Like I wonder if she had them like mounted and framed or something. Like that's interesting. Yeah, and, a lot of these little stories, it does kind of humanize these legends. I mean, you mentioned the Robert Plant example about paying a radio station not to play Stairway to Heaven again. He was embarrassed by the poetry that he wrote as a 24-year-old kid. Think about the poetry that you wrote in college, and now think about 40, 50 years later, having to like revisit that in public. Think of how, I think about, it's almost like the love notes that you wrote when you were teens or something, and now it's out there for public consumption. I completely understand why he's maybe like, oh, I don't really want to, those rhymes embarrass me now because I was young. And it's sort of sweet in a way. A lot of the stories that we talk about on the show, actually, I think have a really weirdly sweet undercurrent.
You're so right about poetry, because I am a poet. That's how that led me to blogging, that led me to podcasting and stuff like that, only because the poetry wasn't doing anything for me. But you're right about that rhyming and stuff like that. If I go back to the latter part of the 70s into the 80s and read my poetry, makes me sick, because it does. It's oh my God, you're right about the rhyming and the timing. It's like, oh my God, you sick fool.
I don't know. I disagree with both of you. I was actually the Biden administration's first choice to read at their inauguration. So I'm quite proud of all my college poetry.
So, I mean, you guys dive into all types of subjects on Too Much Information, such as Blue's Clues, a swimsuit model, and Ralph Lauren, huh?
Oh, boy, that one's incredible.
Yeah, Blue's Clues. We were going to follow Blue's Clues with Eraserhead, but we didn't get it done in time. We really wanted to juxtapose the two. Eraserhead is coming, though. Oh, yeah, the Blue's Clues episode is great. I mean, that's something that we really pride ourselves on this show, is that we really want to do, we really want to have something for everybody. I mean, I call it the, I'm a big 60s nerd. I call it the Ed Sullivan approach, where like, all right, if you don't like the Rolling Stones, maybe you'll like the Plate Spinners, or maybe you'll like, we really want to have this whole variety show mentality. The Blue's Clues show is fun. I mean, his whole, because it's funny, because the host of this show you think is this like kid with a children's TV background. He
Yeah.
was not at all. He was this kid from Pennsylvania who wanted to be a rock and roll star. And he later ended up playing music with members of the Flaming Lips, which is pretty incredible. So he did it. He actually did the theme for Young Sheldon.
Wow.
But yeah, there's this great story where you know, it was the early 2000s and he was on like People Magazine's most eligible bachelors list, and he was getting asked out right and left. And he went and picked up, I think she was a swimsuit model who lived out in New Jersey. So he drove out there and picked her up, and they're leaving her house, and right on her street, one of her neighbors is having their toddler is having a Blue's Clues themed birthday party. And so he's in his car, he's got his, you know, first date with him. He's got the Blue's Clues shirt in the back of the car. He's got some toys and props with him. He goes for it. He pulls into the driveway. He shows up at this kid's birthday, totally blows their mind. It's like Elvis showing up at this kid's birthday. You know, the date that he's with loves it. It's, you know, it's incredible. Yeah, I love that story.
Speaking of people that wanted to be rock stars, I mean, wow, Johnny Depp has proven you can be not only a rock star, you can be an actor, and you can be the #1 binge watch in the world right now.
Good point. Yeah.
I mean, how do you guys determine what are we going to put focus on this week? I mean, it's like Neil Young and Old Man. I have a completely different vision now of this old classic.
Oh man.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's a lot of in our taste in music. Like, I mean, you know, we both love pretty much the entirety of the classic rock canon, but a lot of this stuff is relatively timely because it will be having like a big anniversary coming up, either last year when we first started developing this, or coming up this year. So a lot of the stuff is like turning 50 or turning, you know, 45 or 20 or what have you. So it is sort of timely on that, but you know, we also are able to turn these around fast enough and kind of record quickly enough that if something is we want to do something that's like newsy, we are able to do that. But I don't know that we'll be having a Johnny Depp one.
Now, would you say that your podcast
I'm personally
too much?
Just waiting for.
No, you're waiting for what? I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say I'm personally waiting for his bad stand-up comedy special that he's gonna do like duct tape over the mouth and call it like Triggered or something.
Would you say that Too Much Information, which is on iHeartRadio, is water cooler conversation in the way that you know people are going to talk about it and people are going to be coming to it because they have to experience it?
I hope so. I mean, you know, some of the best, most like heartening comments that we've gotten about this is people were just like, "Oh, I just like hanging out with you guys."
Yes.
And you know, as a pretty dedicated person who doesn't like hanging out, that's very sweet.
I mean, it's not a show for experts. And I feel like, you know, the more you know about a given topic, the less you'll probably enjoy an episode. And it's for the people who are, you know, they're like us. They're curious. They're the type of people who get caught in a Wikipedia web and spend all night going down Google rabbit holes and stuff. I mean, that's more of our target demo. I mean, we certainly don't position ourselves as experts. I mean, in the intro to the show, we describe ourselves as two guys with too much free time. And that's really all it is. I mean, we just have the luxury of being able to dive down these Wikipedia rabbit holes and discover all these weird facts, like Marlon Brando's piano was the one that was used to write the Jeopardy theme. It's like random stuff like that. But I love that stuff. I mean, that stuff's just always. I'm a big trivia buff, so yeah. So that's really what it's more for. We really don't position ourselves as experts at all. We're friends who are curious, really.
Wow, you speak.
I am an expert.
Yeah. Well, hey, Gene Simmons says that, you know, his main theory is if you don't believe it's larger than life, and it won't be. So now that you said that you're an expert, you must be. My God, I'm talking to an expert today. Oh, my God. Well, you bring up Marlon Brando, though. I had the opportunity to meet him. He was in his film trailer, and I was so scared. I went up, knocked on the door, and I just went up and said, "Hi," and he goes, "Yo," and that was it. And he closed the door, and that's my Marlon Brando moment.
Was he working on his patent for tuning conga drums?
Oh God, wouldn't that have been nice if you could sit down? You know, I'll tell you what. Let's go back to Johnny Depp and Marlon Brando. The two of them together playing, you know, even drums or going to the island and stuff. That is a story.
I feel like there are so many.
Yeah,
Woody Harrelson, doesn't he have a bongo like?
That's
McConaughey. Oh, McConaughey. Never mind.
Yeah, McConaughey has that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's because I mean.
Yeah, no, we haven't done anything on Brando yet. I think Jordan, do we have anything on deck that he's been in?
I don't think
episode,
so.
So now, how did you guys dive into the story about Marvin Gaye and the NFL? I mean, I've been in radio for 43 years, and never once did I hear Casey Kasem say anything about the NFL.
I love that so much. Yeah, Marvin was the dawn of the 70s. He was having a rough time, and he was kind of burnt out on the whole Motown machinery thing. And his duet partner, Tammy Terrell, who sang with him on Ain't No Mountain High Enough and You're All Need to Get By, and all these great Motown duets had just died. And he was really depressed, and he was thinking, you know what, I need a change. I want to get out of this. And he wanted to make such a huge change that he wanted to try out for the NFL. And he was friends with some of the Detroit Lions, the local team in Detroit. And I think they kind of jokingly and just also out of friendship were like, yeah, man, like, go give it a shot. But he took it seriously, and he was like running 6 miles a day and doing weight training and everything. And he made a serious go out of trying to, try out for the NFL, until his friends were basically like, yeah, you can't run for 6 months at the age of 30 and think that you can just make it onto the NFL. It takes a little more than that. And yeah, but for the rest of his life, he maintained that he could have been, not to take it back to Brando, he could have been a contender.
Wow.
There it is.
Wow. Hey, Michael, I saw your picture come in. Have I gone overboard?
You got 20 minutes.
Oh, beautiful. Oh, thank God. Let's continue this conversation.
You got till 50.
Oh, man, I'm taking to 49.59, all right? All right, so let's dig in here. You were talking about a Motown and stuff like that. I'm shocked about what's going on with Berry Gordy, only because, I mean, he didn't like it, but yet we've got people, Pharrell here that basically stole it. I mean, what happened here?
Well, Pharrell, I think, is a big. He's another guy who does. He knows where everything that he took came from. I mean, he's the Curtis Mayfield falsetto and everything, and but yeah, Berry Gordy's a wild guy. I mean, the more you read about him in Motown, the more of these little stories you come away with. He's a fascinating character. I think the funniest thing about, maybe not funny, maybe tragic, I think the funniest thing about him and Marvin is the whole like father-son dynamic that they had, which we try to keep it light on the episode, but there's
that was a tough one.
Tough. What do you do in situations like that when it does get tough? Because I mean, sure, we have the power of editing and stuff like that, but you still have to be able to carry the listener forward and make sure that they hear the final questions.
Mostly
Jordan. Yeah, Jordan edits out my tears.
No, we try to approach all this stuff with compassion, especially during the more difficult points. I mean, yeah, the Marvin Gaye story in particular, there's not a lot of levity there. And so that was definitely, as opposed to something like Blue's Clues that had a bit more, that one was a little bit tougher. But also one of my favorite episodes.
Yeah, I think you got to focus on the stuff about it that you really love. I mean, not to take a left turn, but I'm a bass player, so like I truly enjoyed getting the chance to talk about James Jamerson, the bassist who played on What's Going On. I mean, it's one of the best bass lines of the 20th century. So like I like getting excited about the stuff that the little happy points that you can find in maybe a story that otherwise skews a little dark.
I mean, getting excited about stuff is what this show really is all about. I mean, Heigl and I both have a background in listicle writing for websites and stuff. That's been such a huge part of our, writing career. I mean, anyone who came up in journalism in the last 10 years, that's kind of like part of your daily, weekly duty. And I always loved doing it because, I mean, it was so much spite and bile and anger and negativity on the internet. It was just cool to write about something that it was a celebration that everybody was happy about and excited about, and maybe taught them stuff. I mean, I just think it's so cool to, you learn and you share that. And I just think that's a pretty cool gig to be able to do that.
I'm so glad that you talk about your writing like that, because there's so many hider writers out there that don't know what to do because they instantly hide their writing. But the thing is, though, is that people don't understand that podcasting started because of writers. It wasn't comedians. Yeah. It wasn't, people that wanted to do radio. The writers found the stage, and we're on it right now.
Yeah, I mean, writers are desperate people. We'll do whatever we can.
Yes, we will. Oh my god.
We both have a background in Alex wrote for Entertainment Weekly and People magazine. We met at People and for Rolling Stone and VH1, and so that's mostly our background. We're both relatively new at this, at the whole podcasting thing. So
I still can't believe they're letting me do it.
Yeah.
Really? You're a natural.
Yeah, but are we ever going to grow away from the stage when people say, "So what are you doing?" I podcast. You what? I podcast. So
I mean, I think. Oh, go ahead.
No, you go, please.
Oh, I was just saying. I mean, I do think we're in kind of a boom phase of it right now, so it can be a bit of a pun. I mean, the tweet that I always go back to is a group of white men. It's called a podcast, but it's still cool, man. I mean, I've gotten more into it as Jordan has pulled me into the world, and there's still some really good stuff out there. I think, it can be a punchline, but as long as the thing that you're making is good, I can hold my head up high.
You never talk down to your audience. I feel like
never. You're absolutely right. Yep.
Really, I think that's kind of like, they're your friends. Like, why would you do that to your friends? Why would you do that to your listeners? I think that's a crucial part too. I mean, we want to welcome people into our conversation and, sit with us and hang out. I mean, that's really what it comes down to.
You guys need to send a link to your Michael Myers and Dana Carvey story to Howard Stern, because he's still in denial of why this even broke up, and you guys need to send a link to him.
What? I feel like he's talked to them both about that.
Yeah, he's still lost as to what happened, and it's like, dude, I've heard your interviews. Come on,
multiple times. Yeah, about it.
For you guys to jump on that story, I mean, it's like it still adds to the mystique and the mystery, and it's almost like get back together so we can get back to some real good humor.
Oh man, I mean, from that episode, the story that really gets me is the George Harrison story with Mike Myers. That was the one that was like, I had to cut out like a good 30 seconds of me getting choked up after that one, because Mike Myers was such a huge Beatles fan, and he wrote Austin Powers as kind of a tribute to his dad who had died and the Beatles. And he gets a note from George Harrison, who was his favorite Beatle because it reminded him of his dad. The day that George died, it was the last note that he'd ever written. And it was an Austin Powers fan letter. And it was telling him how much he loved Austin Powers. And Mike had in interviews, he talked about how he loved the Beatles as a kid, and he cried at the end of A Hard Day's Night when the helicopter takes off, because he wanted to keep hanging out with the Beatles. And I guess George Harrison had heard this story, because the kicker at the end of this letter, the last letter he ever wrote was, "I'm sorry I left you on the helicopter that day. I promise I'll never do it again. I promise I'll never do it again." Mike Myers is reading this the day George Harrison died. I mean, good Lord.
Oh my God. Wow. You guys have got to come back. You guys have got to come back to this show anytime in the future. The door is always going to be open for you.
Oh, thank you so much.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, man. We appreciate that.
Excellent. Well, you be brilliant. Get back to your writing. Do your podcasting thing, and and then go do your real job.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, man. Sierra.